Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew. I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on this side of the border. As always, hopefully we can get your feel across the border somehow. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Good. A bit chilly, but been good. It has been a rainy weekend, but this is one of the few days of sun, so hooray.
You're in Southern California. You're not allowed to say it's chilly. I'm just kidding.
That's
Do what you want.
you
Do what
got
you want.
snow.
Yes. Well, what I told you is true from a certain point of view.
That's true.
Luke, we struggle with the way reality itself is mediated through our own differing perspectives. We're talking about what we're talking about this week, by the way. There's a segue. That's doubly true with dramatized history and especially fiction, where manipulating perspectives is an integral tool in the storytelling trade. Star Wars canon, however, we have a sense that there's some pseudo-historical reality playing out on our screens and in our pages. So this week we explore the extent to which that is the case, the amount that it isn't, and if there's even a possibility of being this pseudo-historical reality that is canon. Get the plugs out of the way. Off the top, we're also on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Most importantly, most actively on the Bisky, on the Blue Sky, on the Butterfly app, or Blue Sky at Iron Cannon, just Iron Cannon, not Iron Cannon Pod, Iron Cannon. Please do check us out.
Mike
Joel,
Chang just followed us on Blue Sky
there
today.
we go. There we go. Maybe I'll I'll comment. Did you? Because you've been doing book of the day, right?
Yes, and he was on. I can't always ping every author because not
Sure.
every author's on Blue Sky. But Mike Chang was, and I did Brotherhood this
Yes.
week for this. Not this week. This day for Book
Yes.
of the Day.
You want to talk about a book that does so much work in helping us understand the Asian American experience and how Neimoidians are coded. And yeah, really, he goes there. He goes for it. I love how he goes for it. So yeah, Mike, if you're by any chance listening, great job. There we go. Speaking of listening, if you prefer audio only, we do throw this episode up on Spotify and Apple Podcast right after. Don't search Iron Canon, search Iron Canon Podcast if you're looking for it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, please do give us a shout. Let us know. Last but not least, we are. Well, it's not last but not least. We got a few more to go. We are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network here on the Underworld YouTube channel. We got memberships, we got super chats. So please do support the network, support the channel as much as you're willing, as much as you're able. Also, most importantly, I'd say with the Underworld Network is the Discord server and the community that you and Joel, you and Ben have brought together and shepherded, and just a lot of people chiming every day. I see folks chiming in, adding things. I think a lot of the Ask SWU on the flagship generates a lot of good buzz and conversation. It's a great place to do it. So yeah, check the link in the description below to get into our Discord server if you're willing and able to be a decent human being. Obviously, discussion and debate is welcome. Legitimate Star Wars opinions are welcome, but please be kind and welcoming as well. Any events coming up? Any recent events that happened? Or any events coming up in the Discord?
Well, last week we had a tried and true game night, as always. And this week we'll be going back to movie night. We'll be
Yes.
watching the one, the only Princess Mononoke of Studio Ghibli fame this coming Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yes. Check that out. If you don't have other plans Friday night, uh, come and hide. It'll be fun. Come and join. Come and join. I might even chime in for that one because I don't have other plans either. That means I do have plans on Wednesday night, and this is the last plug we'll do here on the Underworld Network, YouTube channel. We got the Tractor Beam comics reviews. Comics are for Wednesdays. Wednesdays are for comics. And this week, Chris Abbott and I, right here at 6 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, are chatting all about High Republic Adventures number 15 and Bad Batch Ghost Agents, not Ghost Stories, Bad Batch Ghost Agents number 1. That's kicking off. We're going back to the Clone Wars, going back to the Battle of Ariado, continuing the Battle of Ariado in the High Republic climax finale of the High Republic, and kicking off it's Hyperspace Stories, Bad Batch Ghost Agents number 1. So be sure to check that out right here again on 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Underworld YouTube channel and Twitch and Twitter and or not Twitter, Twitch and Facebook, and also it also that has its own Spotify and Apple podcast feed, track reviewing comics reviews. So do check that out. All right, Joel, up to you. Carry the weight. What do we got this week?
This week in Star Wars, I'm going to read Palpatine's speech from The Revenge of the Sith, the novelization version. So yeah, I just thought, since it's Revenge of the Sith 20, why not read this version of the speech from the novel? And you might be thinking, really, is the speech different from the movie? Actually, yes, it is. It's longer. Obviously, the point still stands, and what ultimately what the whole point of the speech is. But I thought I'd read it and get some reactions. Because we all know the speech from the movie. What's the speech from the book sound like? So set the stage, set the scene. It begins like the movie, though. Bale's coming in, just in the middle in mid speech. Palpatine's going on, and he starts to hear it. These Jedi murderers left me scarred, left me deformed, but they could not scar my integrity. They could not deform my resolve. The remaining traitors will be hunted down, rooted out, wherever they may hide, and brought to justice, dead or alive. All collaborators will suffer the same fate. Those who protect the enemies are the enemy. Those who protect the enemy are the enemy. Now is the time. Now we will strike back. Now we will destroy the destroyers. Death to the enemies of the democracy. This has been most trying of times, but we have passed the test. The war is over. The separatists have been utterly defeated, and the Republic will stand united, and free. The Jedi Rebellion was our final test. It was the last gasp of the forces of darkness. Now we have left the darkness behind us forever, and a new day has begun. It is morning in the Republic. Never again will we be divided. Never again will sector turn against sector, planet turn against planet, sibling turn against sibling. We are one nation, indivisible. To ensure that we stand together, that we always speak with a single voice and act with a single hand, the Republic must change. We must evolve. We must grow. We have become an empire, in fact. Let us become an empire in name as well. We are the first galactic empire. We are an empire that will continue to be ruled by this august body. We are an empire that will never return to the political maneuverings and corruption that have wounded us so deeply. We are an empire that will be directed by one single sovereign, chosen for life. We are an empire ruled by the majority, an empire ruled by a new constitution, an empire of laws, not of politicians, an empire devoted to the preservation of a just society, of a safe and secure society. We are an empire that will stand 10,000 years. We will celebrate the anniversary of this day as Empire Day, for the sake of our children, for our children's children, for the next 10,000 years. Safety, security, justice, and peace. Say it with me. Safety, security, justice, and peace. Safety, security, justice, and peace. And that's it. That is the book version of the speech. So, as a fan of Revenge of the Sith, Matthew, as you have told me on occasion, what do you think of the book version?
I mean, that speech isn't relevant at all to today. I don't know. Where do you figure that? No. Interesting. How just thinking in terms of just a writer standpoint, speech writer kind of standpoint. I'm not a speech writer, but I've written for speech before. It's interesting. he doesn't climax on will be reorganized, because the classic thing we hear in our ears is reorganized into the first galactic the climax empire for the safe and secure society. Yeah, it climaxes on what he promises the empire will bring. It'll bring this mantra, right? I forget what the words are, but peace, security, safety, security, justice, and peace.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely goes into more detail. That's true. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the gist is the same, but I think, yeah, maybe, again, the emphasis, it's an emphasis more on what he's claiming, what he's offering, what he's selling here. And
Yeah.
it scores, and it reminds us why so many people bought what he was selling. Right? It's an empire of laws, not of politicians. That was the big accusation, right? That these politicians, career politicians who just have their little petty interests. Well, too bad. It's going to be a galactic empire instead, and we're all going to be unified, and we're going to come together in this great work. Here's just thinking about this great work of building a society from the ashes of the Clone Wars, and it does definitely reminds me of. I mean, I'm sure Chris Kemchell Beaumontkin reading this version of the story or this version of the speech really or getting the ideas of it. Again, a galaxy so exhausted by, so wearied by the Clone Wars that they'll definitely they definitely want this unifying force to come in and say, all right, trust me, and I'll make everything better again, make the galaxy great again. And so, yeah, it definitely goes into that. It's more, it's less villainous, oddly enough, less explicitly villainous, therefore, of course, more deceptively villainous. It's the kind of thing you would vote for. You won't vote for Galactic Empire. You'll vote for safety, security, justice, and peace, because we all do. you know. So, yeah,
Regardless.
yeah, everything he added in that novel, I remember it kind of being this weird experience. Maybe we'll get into this on our main topic, but it was always this weird experience of, okay, what's the real version here? Because there are differences. This is very incredibly rich and incredibly detailed of a novel. It's one of the best legends novels there are.
Should review
But,
it.
yeah, we should. I should reread it. So yeah, yeah. Thanks for reading that. That was great.
I have a few points I want to bring up.
Yeah.
So, fun fact. Funny how you mentioned which is the real version. There's actually a third version of this
Oh
speech.
wow.
That somebody else did. Completely ignores this.
Mhm.
And is like you know how like speeches like the State of the Union speech will be like posted on the website of every
Yeah.
president. It's sort of like that. Someone made like an official speech posting of the Palpatine speech
Hmm.
that aligns more with what the movie says, but then adds a whole bunch of other stuff to it as well.
Hmm.
So there's a third version out there. I didn't read that because it was longer, and I wanted to
Sure.
stretch for time. I might read it some other time because I want to see your reaction to the
Yeah.
third version of the speech
Right.
in another day, which is
Hmm.
interesting. And also two things that stand out to me is not very unsubtle. There are two things
Yeah.
here that maybe because you're Canadian you didn't notice.
Mm.
And I say that because it's very
It's probably
American.
true. It's probably true. Yeah.
It is Morning in the Republic. There is a Reagan
Mm.
campaign thing called Morning in America, where it's like, I'm Ronald Reagan. We've had a lot of stupid Jimmy Carter, but like me, it's gonna be Morning in America again.
Hmm.
I'm Ronald Reagan. I prove this
Right.
amazing. So there's that Morning in America. It's Morning in the Republic. Um, that's a campaign ad, and then the "We are one nation, indivisible."
Yeah.
Um,
That I noticed.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, that one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Da,
Hmm.
da, 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 da. So yeah, those were the two very on the nose things that I noticed in this version of the speech. Um,
Hmm.
and I also think I also just thought was interesting. I showed this to our friends at Daughter the Ferrex podcast on their
Hmm.
Discord. When he was talking, when Palpatine was talking about how our friend Ellie was like, at least Palpatine's being honest. When he's Palpatine would talk about like we have become an empire. Let us now
Yeah.
become an empire in name as well.
Yeah.
It's like I kind of like that moment because he's like, I mean, let's face it, guys, we're already an empire. Let's get rid of the formalities here. Let's just go full on
Yeah.
imperial sovereignty. Who are we fooling? Palpatine's like, who are we fooling, fellas? We got almost everything. Let's just make it official.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that part interesting as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love these little differences. This is one of the. This is. I don't know if this is Matthew Stover's own edition or is this an old or is this an old draft because he was working
Probably
off
actually.
older drafts of the Revenge of the Sith script at the time, and then George did a lot of re-editing down the line. Revenge of the Sith
Mhm.
making is a fascinating. You should definitely, if you have find books about it, like the
Yeah.
making of that movie in particular is fascinating, and a lot of the edits and cuts being made, and the
True.
differences between the novelization and the movie. But no, that was just a few of the things I noticed when reading and seeing this version of the
Yeah.
speech.
I have the Hawken $300 Paul Duncan book. The like the making of Star Wars, the
Ooh, that's a
prequel
good.
trilogy.
Ooh, but
Uh,
there's an actual
yeah, I'm sure
who
there's
was
a
the
making of.
who was the guy who died, but he was like really good at these making ofs.
Oh, I don't remember.
I forgot. I
Sure, I'm
will.
sure Dom, whoever else will know. One last one I want to say is the whole thing of the let's become an empire name as well. Yeah, it reminds me of Maul in Siege of Mandalore, right? So
Mhm.
look around you, Ahsoka. It's already an empire. Republic's been an empire for at least 50 years, if not more. It's interesting. I brought up some of the great works, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things the Luminous authors are definitely doing there is saying even this benevolent
Mhm.
quest of state building
Mhm.
of let's come together and be a society in common and contribute your distinctive culture and have this cultural exchange. I mean that's what we have multiculturalism. We have kind of the global village
Mhm.
at its best. That can be better than at its worst. It could be very easily twisted and manipulated.
Mhm.
Not the least of which, as we're seeing, in that their dystopian hellhole of a country. Sorry, which I'm visiting in a week and a half.
I
Anyway,
mean, has it really
please let
changed
me
at
in.
all?
Please let me in. Please let me in.
I mean, hey, we could say a lot about your Canada too, buddy.
Sure,
You're
we're not
with
great.
us.
Anyway, yeah, hopefully I don't catch
We're
up.
all linked to England.
As what's happening in the United States now, in terms
Right.
of, I mean, what it's been happening for years in terms of digital footprint and um, people's online identities, and I just mean how President Elon now has control and access to everyone's private information. He did already, probably, but now he definitely does. Um, there's ways of the algorithms, right? The ways of making people not necessarily believe a certain uniform thing, but be engulfed in these intractable conflicts over things that are actually distractions from what they're facing now. So please let me back into America. I am going to JW Rinsler. Is that who
That's
it
it.
is?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
actually
thanks,
what I
thank
was
you.
looking up. Thank you, Skywalker Academy. I'm
Yeah,
about to say.
yeah.
I'm about to say
So
that. I loved it.
I mean that's it again. That gets at that question of imperial uniformity and conformity versus an authentic unity that celebrates differences, but the different people with differences don't go off into their own little corners either. They
Mhm.
actually encounter each other and this culture of encounter. So
Yeah.
yeah, that I mean that Lena So is trying to get at. Palpatine has this incredibly dark, twisted version of that. So
I mean,
yeah,
well, I mean, I think of it more as the Roman thing. I mean, was the transition from Rome Empire to
yeah,
Rome Republic really that drastic? Outside of maybe just Augustus was hanging around the Senate
no,
more.
I mean that's the model, right?
Yeah.
That George was going on. Obviously, he was also going on the U.S. and
Oh yeah, well, obviously
but
it's Rome, U.S. It's any empire that's
yeah,
Britain.
British Empire. So, oh, I forgot to tell you. Sorry. Uh, Anyway, but yeah, that's all I got.
That's all I got too. We could probably make this the whole topic in itself. Actually, that'd be a fun topic: transition from empire to republic,
Mhm,
or vice versa. My bad.
mm,
But yeah, but that's the novelization version of the speech. Go read the novel; it's
yeah,
really good.
do it. I read it a while ago. Yeah. I had a very busy week, so I don't have anything. So why don't we just dive into our main topic then?
Well, I mean, what I could say is true, but from a certain point of view. Uh da 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 da. All right. So we're canon junkies, as I like to call ourselves. We love our lore. That's why we do this podcast, among
Hmm.
other reasons, of course.
Hmm.
I think that a lot of us in the in the fandom, and I sometimes think we might ourselves might fall into this trap a little bit.
Hmm.
I think we very much have a thing of when we watch or read a Star Wars, we take things very much at face value. Like
Hmm.
this is the depiction of that is 100% accurate. This is the canonical telling of this story. Right? Like we are very much like this.
Hmm.
With the exception of stuff that's obviously not canonical, like visions, but I think that's a very hard line.
Yeah.
Um, but with everything else and Lego stuff, that's its own universe.
Hmm.
'Cause we love Legos. But when we watch the movies, read the books, we think this is the way it is 100% told and how it went down and how everything feels and vibes like, and that is it because it's
Hmm.
canon and la da da. But I think even within the canon framework, there is still very much a from a certain point of view going on here. Um, I think a great example on screen is Young Jedi Adventures. That's
Hmm.
canon, and
Yeah.
yet, do we really believe that the little kitty Young Jedi Knights Adventures is a live action version that goes exactly like that? I don't think so. We get into things like tone and
Hmm.
thematic some themes
Hmm.
and what the story's telling us the um beyond the wider scope of the real of this quote unquote realistic galaxy.
Hmm.
Um and like what are the implications of certain things? And are does it go into it? Does it not? So like I have a long thing and I'll be quiet. So
Yeah.
like I think that in George's saga, if we just think of George's films and kind of separate everything out for a hot second, I'm always of the opinion that his films and his kind of lore and backstory very much want you to take things at face value. If the Kroll
Hmm.
says the Republic was great for 1,000 years and then it only started to get corrupt in the last 50, I really do think that in George's world, yeah, we take that at
Hmm.
face value. Republic was
Yeah.
great, the Jedi were great, and now things are only starting to go downhill. Um, but that's from the George Lucas point of view of things.
Hmm.
We get into the Acolyte, and 100 years before those prequels, and we start to see maybe even when the supposed greatness of the Republic, oh, there were still lots of problems and issues and
Hmm.
whatnot. Um, we also have to take into account, what are these films trying to do in terms of a story, thematic, dramatic storytelling versus something like my favorite book, Rise and Fall of the Empire, which is a in-universe textbook,
Yeah.
an academic history that wants to portray certain events as more realistic and the implications around it than just, oh, we need the drama because of this dramatic moment.
Sure.
Um, and when you got and also different authors having their own different opinions about different
Hmm.
things and whatnot as well. Um, so I think that it's interesting that we have such, everything is canon. And I think that does mean something. I'm not saying it doesn't,
Mhm,
but also I think we have to. I don't think every Star Wars story is quote unquote objective or objectively the truth.
mhm,
And I think that's just really interesting. But
mhm.
I'll toss it to you, Matthew. What are your
Yeah.
overall thoughts on this topic before we get into some specifics?
It's interesting, maybe kind of how for both of us, how our minds work here.
Hmm.
That a show that's or podcast that's focused on canon and canon continuity and not just canon continuity, but the all these other you know books and comics and video games and everything,
Hmm.
and how it may thinking about how it all holds together or not, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, that when we sit down to actually review a story,
Hmm.
the place we go is character. Is here's this character that goes from one beginning, and a good story will take a character from one moment in their life and put them through a ringer, and they'll grow and become a better person, ideally,
Right.
or achieve their goal or whatever. And to think in those terms, right? Like on Wednesday we talked about Lorna D and her transition, her growth, and that's and we brought out Keith Trennis, and we talk about Keith Trennis about the decline of the Republic, the decline of the Jedi. She's the bellwether for that. So, and that's 200 years before. So, um, yeah, it raises this interesting thing, of I mean, I think part of the mission of Iron Cannon podcast, actually helping people, frankly, and this is gonna sound it's gonna sound confident, if not arrogant, helping people be better Star Wars fans, better, engage better with these stories. But here's what I mean by that is to say, you know, what yeah, if we did take things at face value all the time, these fiction stories were not engaging the actual story, because a good author knows that that's actually completely impossible. That's not even the objective, is
Hmm.
to tell a uh to tell this it's not the objective to tell this objective story. I'm thinking I brought up at the top dramatized history.
Hmm.
When we tell so I brought up James Mangold's A Complete Unknown, which is uh, in yeah, it has a shot at winning the Oscars. Um,
Oh, if it does, I hope so because if it does, okay, I'm sorry. I want to just
yeah,
change this a little bit. If it does,
tangent.
Lucasfilm has this really kind of bad, but this
Mhm.
might work in a good sense. Bad thing of like really loving getting directors who are hot at the moment. And if
Yeah,
James Mangold wins the Oscar, oh man, you know that he's already on board. But it's like they're
yeah.
gonna be like, oh, we want James Mangold now because he's now like his Hollywood stock
Oh
has
yeah,
gone up. So it's like Oscar winner James
there we go.
Mangold,
That
Dawn of the
happened,
Jedi.
that happened with Michelle Yeoh in Section 31, right? Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, but
Um,
I like James Mangold. I think he can
yeah.
deliver the
Oh
goods.
yeah, he's fantastic. What I was getting at though is, yeah, that is showing that it revolves around a real thing that happened in the real world.
Hmm.
We either, we know people who were at this folk festival where Bob Dylan came out with this electric song, and it angered literally everybody.
Hmm.
And so, and the point of that film isn't simply to show just this sanitized account of history. It's still to portray a character, still to make this almost this judgment on this character in this moment, because it depicts him kind of anti-heroically. It depicts him as this jerk, arrogant jerk who didn't care about
Hmm.
traditions and didn't care about
Hmm.
what Pete Seeger and everyone was building as a social movement and social conscience. It depicted him as pretty selfish and pretty
Hmm.
um you know anti what they were building. So uh it make me I'm making this judgment on this character. Maybe Bob Dylan himself in the real world reflects on that time, probably doesn't agree. uh the history itself might be different, but that's the film, that's the story. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is this interesting thing. The one wrinkle again with Star Wars, I think you brought up, is continuity. And so, I do think uh even the authors of the High Republic, even Leslie Headland, she wasn't going to make the Republic and the Jedi. I mean, well, we can debate to whether or not what extent the Republic and the Jedi are corrupt, even by the late Republic. Although the Senate is pretty mired in stuff, in nonsense. But she was, Leslie Headland wasn't going to really depict the Senate as a whole as that corrupt. It was heading that way, and in the High Republic, it's heading that way. But we have Lena So, like I was saying before, and the Senate, they're genuinely trying to build a society, and she's genuinely trying to build a society. She is this highly fictionalized before image that fits with the in-universe history of this is a golden age, which is a whole other topic that we will get to next month probably. Uh, that is on the precipice of a fall and a decline, and so that is the history. That's the history that Beaumont Kin writes. Of course, Chris Grimshaw. That's the history that George Lucas tells. That's the history that Ray and Luke on October are talking about, right? Um, at the height of their powers, they let him rise from the Empire and wipe them out. So, um, yeah, it's a really fascinating discussion within Star Wars, uh, because we have these pressures. Again, to summarize what I'm saying, these pressures to say, uh, yeah, it's fiction, and so all fiction is telling something meaningful. Is fiction, the idea of stories are meaning making, and yet there's this canon continuity with these large scale historical events. So there's that.
Uh,
Love what Skywalker's point here. Last Jedi is the ultimate example of in misdirection belief, and how people misremember history based on their own incredibly difficult experiences. Right. That's a meaning making, and Luke learning to remember history, remember his own story more fully, because Ray is able to help them. But it's also about what happened with his Jedi Academy, what happened with Ben and Kylo Ren, and then of course we have Charles Soule. He's writing that story. He's telling that story in a comic book, but even then, it's from this perspective of this character. It's never this kind of purely sanitized. Maybe gets more kind of sets out what the facts are, but yeah.
well, that's a good to my kind of my next point. I'm just going to add something that I don't think I put in notes, but
Yeah,
I still think it works. So focus and point of view.
mm-hmm.
What is the story's primary focus? What
Yeah,
is the story's primary viewpoint here? And funny
perspective.
enough, this is actually a great way to go talk about Revenge of the Sith again.
Mm-hmm.
I've been learning quite a little bit about the making of this. So George, when making that movie, this is in J.W. Winsler making a Revenge of the Sith book,
Mm-hmm.
which I actually put in the Discord, Matthew, if you ever want to take a
Yeah,
look at it and get it off of get
I really
online.
should.
Um, he talks about how in the beginning, the script was so huge, and he had a story for everybody. We see a little bit of that in the novelization. We see a little bit of that
Mm-hmm.
in some of the lead scenes, and ultimately, George was like, this is about Anakin. This is about his fall, his choices to the dark side. So people who are like, well, I want to see more of the corruption of the Empire and the fascization of it, or I want to see the Padme stuff, which I can kind of get,
Mm,
or I
yeah.
want to see more Count Dooku and General Grievous and what are they thinking?
Good
George
point.
was like, well, I didn't fit all that. And this is,
Mm-hmm.
if anyone could get away with a 4-hour movie, he probably could have. But I think George was probably right on this one as an editor to like, nope, I'm gonna tone this down. I'm gonna shave it off. I'm gonna trim this over need fat. and we're just
Yeah.
gonna hone in on Anakin because ultimately, as I've said before, the 6 films in their bubble, the 6 Lucas movies, their
Hmm.
focus is about Anakin. They're the Anakin story.
Yeah.
The rest of Star Wars is about Anakin. Sometimes he's in it, but it's not always about him. Um,
I
but
might disagree, but go ahead.
well, I mean,
Sorry.
his influence is there, but it's like Andor stories about Andor and the rebellion.
True.
I mean, Ahsoka got a lot to do about Anakin for sure.
Hmm.
It's like Mando and Grogu are doing their thing. It's their story. Luke
Hmm.
just shows up and then he goes away. Um,
Yeah.
and then Boba Fett's a mess. And Grill Kenobi too. But we
Hmm.
definitely got some tangential Anakin stuff. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the retroactively, the 6 movies are about Anakin and and kind of from well, they're not all from his perspective, but the third one
Hmm.
certainly is from his perspective. So it's like, why aren't we seeing more Senate scenes and passing bills that say more security? Well, that's because that's not what the story's about. It's about Anakin and,
Hmm.
his fall. If you want stories that are kind of going all over the place, focusing on different things, that's what the Clone Wars was made
Yeah.
for. So that's why I always say Clone Wars is more George's attempt. Like, if the 6 films are the story of Anakin Skywalker, the Clone Wars is George's attempt to do the expanded universe. Where it's
Hmm.
like, today we're
Yeah.
just going to focus on this senator and what's going
Yeah.
on here, and then the banking clan, and now we'll do all the things that we didn't get a chance to focus on. And you're reading about the the Mask of Fear. That
Yeah.
obviously that about what happens in Revenge of the Sith, but its focus is on the politicians and the local
Yeah.
people with Saw, I guess, because Saw's the local, and like the early stages of the rebellion, and what senators and their staffers are doing in this new age of empire. Hooray!
Hmm.
That's the focus of that movie. The focus of Revenge of the Sith is the tragic downfall of Anakin. Mask of
Hmm.
Fear is the political story, really getting
Yeah.
into the senators and whatnot, which we didn't have
Although
time for in the movie.
that's set after Revenge of the Sith, but
Well, it's set after Revenge of the Sith, but that's what its focus is on, for sure.
yeah.
Well,
Yes. Yeah.
they cut out all the senator scenes in Revenge of the Sith because George said, I want to focus just on Anakin.
Yeah.
Um, you know, So, different stories have different focuses
Hmm.
as well. And I can get into how things outside the saga even have different focuses and kind of make you think differently about certain things. But I'll stop right there and get your reaction to this kind of point about
Yeah.
focus.
So I mean, Clone Wars, and we'll get to Clone Wars again in a little bit, but that's a great example. And it's a great way to think about Revenge of the Sith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, I do think it would have been strengthened if we had the delegation of 1,000
2000.
or 2,000, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not going to touch Palpatine. Um,
Yeah.
delegation of
Million.
2,000. If we had Padme doing a lot more, definitely sacrificed her, but sacrificed her for the sake of having this character focus. And so a lot of people do feel that sacrifice. I don't feel it as much because it is so tightly focused. And that's one of the amazing, perfect, brilliant things about this film. It's so obsessively focused on Anakin's obsession with Padme, with saving her life, with everything he's willing to do and compromise for that. And so yeah, it's that the war is this backdrop. The war
Mm-hmm.
is the setting
Mm-hmm.
for the real story, which is, yeah, like what George is saying. This is the story he wanted to tell. Of course, Star Wars, I keep saying that, I say this all the time. Star Wars at its best is saying something on the cosmic, the political, and the personal at the same time. And so where we
It's
do get that very intensely is the high ground moment, which is, again, my favorite moment in all of Star Wars, period, because it hits that so perfectly, so concisely. You were the chosen one, so you're supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the galaxy, not live in darkness. And you were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Uh, that's the focus of that film, and so that's why the kind of that, and kind of any kind of question of facts, hearsay. I mean, there's only two witnesses there, right?
Yeah.
Um, and of course, and that's the thing is, Vader remembers that moment differently, right? We see in Kenobi, we see in Kieran Gillen, we see in Charles Soule's comic, Vader remembers that, or tries his best to remember that as his defeat of Anakin. Whereas, of course,
Mhm.
and of course, Obi-Wan remembers it as his failure of Anakin, when it was really, I mean, who could say what it really is in terms of any kind of factual thing of, yes, Obi-Wan technically defeats Vader by chopping off his legs and letting him burn. But what does that moment mean? And that's what these stories are really talking about and really focused on. And so that's what we always say, is that the kind of the facts are going to serve that meaning and serve that purpose. Again, it's just that we want things to line up and want things to, and well, that's the interesting thing, is we
I want to
want
feel all
the thing
tonally the same too, I think.
we want, yeah, we want things to serve this wider meaning. I mean, that's the thing. George, we've talked about how George, he might not have always been consistent. He was generally pretty consistent about what the Force is and what the Force is on about. Um, there, and that's the thing that we've done episodes on, with your Star Wars having this consistent DNA that even shows as tonally wildly different, like Young Jedi Adventures and Andor, still have Star Wars DNA at heart, right?
Mhm.
That's the wild thing.
Yeah.
And so that,
Also,
yeah, so good.
oh no, I also think you brought up a great point about the war because, like,
Mhm.
I think all the saga films, for the most part, the war is always in the backdrop. It's never really actually about the war
Right.
itself. Like the war is like a political statement. Especially
Mhm.
well, prequels, it's like, well, you get the beginning of the Clone Wars at the very tail end.
Sure.
And most of that's just spent, on Anakin and Padme and Obi-Wan's drama.
Mhm.
Original trilogy and sequel trilogy, kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
You know, Luke, Han, and Leia kind of having their adventures, but they're never with the rebellion for that long. It's like they're
Mhm.
always going off and doing their own thing, or Luke's having his Jedi moments, or
Nothing.
Rey and Kylo are having their spiritual Force
Yeah.
dyad moments.
Mhm.
So the focus is never the war is always the backdrop, which is why I think people really always, which is why it's like I think movies and shows like Andor and Rogue One gravitate towards people where the war is more the focus, right? Like we
Yeah.
see the actual machinations of rebellion in those shows. The Clone Wars, we get to see the war and the battles and the
Yeah.
machinations. We don't really have anything for that yet with sequels, really. I mean, we got the Kylo Ren stuff, but it looks like Kylo Ren's going on his own. He's about to go on his spiritual adventures, and
Mhm.
Hux is begging him, "Please focus on the war
Yeah.
stuff. Why do I
That
have to
was
build
funny.
this throne? I don't
Speaking of
want."
Charles Soule, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I actually have a thing with Charles Soule and his Vader comic, which actually
Yeah.
going to be interesting later.
Well,
But I'll get to that in a bit.
I have a point about Charles Soule's Light of the Jedi, but keep going. I'll get back to
But
that.
but again, the focus. Like I
Mhm.
think the Acolyte, because it's a story about the Jedi Order as an institution,
Mhm.
we actually see the Jedi Order as an institution and maybe its problems. Well, again, I feel like the prequels are mostly about Anakin and his character choices, and like you shouldn't be chopping off Tusken's heads when your mom dies and giving into your anger. Don't really go into like they don't go too much into Jedi
Mhm.
politics that much, and when they
Right.
do, it's kind of justified. Get the Chancellor, the Sith Lord, consolidating power, and the war is kind of dragging everybody down.
Mhm.
But again, the focus is on Anakin, and he makes the
Mhm.
wrong choice
Yeah.
in that moment. So again, the focus of those
Yeah.
stories is very interesting. Um, as
I just
well.
wanna jump in
Okay.
to say, what was I say? Yeah, well, first off to say I do think Force Awakens would have, I subscribe to the idea that Force Awakens could have done more with the political backdrop. And then that
It
I think,
needed a good conference scene, like in the first episode 4.
yeah, yeah, or just giving us a sense of what's happening.
That too. Yeah, I agree with
because
that.
that does affect, because it affects the characters, right?
Right.
And that's the point. Is it's not that these things are unimportant. The question is, how are they important to the characters, to the main characters? And it's very clear how important the Clone Wars are to these characters. It's very clear how the rebellion is important. The war against the rebellion or the Empire is to all these characters. It's different. I mean, Han's whole story is to start caring about
Mhm.
these things.
Right.
Luke, it's to actually go out and make a difference, right?
Mm.
Um, so it's not to say that those aren't important. I think about Light of the Jedi and how I think some people may have struggled to get into that, because a good chunk of that is about setting up all the facts, getting all the pieces on the board, shows what the board is, and it had to do that, right? It would have been kind of cheap if we just had this sort of guidebook. I mean, it might have been helpful. Then we did get something like that. It's here too. This guidebook saying, okay, this is the situation, this is where we're at. Um, there and now, great disaster, cut the middle, and then go straight to the emotional, dramatic tension of that moment of Avar keeping this, basically you doing this battle meditation that keeps the ship from crashing into the sun, and that intensity, the intensity of that moment, that is brilliant. Um, but we're introduced to all these different characters, and it does kind of wash over you a little bit. And so that's the thing, is when it goes maybe a little, has to go a little too hard on the uh, yeah, on the backdrop and the setting. Again, it's not to say you can't have a good political story. Here's the thing about uh Mask of Fear, Mon Mothma, you get into her head so much, and yeah, that her you get into her head. It's about politics, because it's about Mon Mothma, and that's maybe it. Maybe that's the way of putting it. Mask of Fear is about politics, because it's about Mon Mothma, and Mon Mothma, what she's doing in that moment, is is using the instruments of the Senate to do what she can in that moment. And I think we're going to get some of that. I mean, that's the thing with Andor, right? It is about the rebellion because it's about Andor, and about his merging involvement in the Rebel Alliance over time. We're going to get Mon Mothma. It's going to get the politics in the Senate and the futility of the Senate in that time period, because it's about Mon Mothma, and we're going to get her character. So that's, I mean, we keep saying a lot about this, but it is good to go into different stories, different ways, looking at things like that. But yeah,
But,
it's
but I
all we all
also
are just coming back to character. Goes back to
right.
character.
Speaking of character,
Hmm.
though, I also think that focus
Hmm.
and perspective make can change the reader
Hmm.
viewer perspective on previous events that you couldn't that you might not have thought of.
Your focus
Uh,
determines your reality. What?
yeah, like I always say the original trilogy is a very Luke focused story because
Hmm.
it's kind of everything through his eyes.
Yeah.
We're seeing the galaxy through his eyes the most, and at the end of that movie, when Anakin comes back and defeats the Emperor, what do we see? We see Anakin through Luke's eyes, the
Yeah.
redeemed father. Looking at his son. Good job.
He's the main character, right?
Right. But then, we get a Leia story through Princess and the Scoundrel, through
Hmm.
Bloodline, or we get the Ahsoka story in Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Got her name on it.
Hmm.
And we see, and whenever we talk about or see Anakin Skywalker, it's this complicated. Is he redeemed? Did he really? Can I really forgive him for every fire hydrant out there? For everything that he did, torture me, blow up my planet, kill my parents
Hmm.
with Leia, or kind of the complicated feelings Ahsoka has still about Anakin and all what he did and whatnot, and so
Hmm.
I think where if you just watch the 6 movies, then as far as you're concerned, yeah, Anakin got redeemed. He Force Ghost. It's all cool.
Hmm.
You go outside those 6 movies, outside the Lucas perspective, if we want to just talk about the artist for a second.
Right.
Um, Anakin's redemption is more complicated. Do we even think he got redeemed? There's that question. And I think and depending on who the writer author is, they'll have a probably a very different take on it than say George Lucas. Like they have to still work with the fact that yes, Anakin can be Force Ghost. You know, we saw him; he can do that. But does that mean all's cool now? He's a good guy. He's on our side. Everyone's cool. Everyone's cool. Everyone cool. Cool.
Not quite, but
yeah, exactly. The answer is a lot of people still know cool. They still know cool with you, Anakin. Yeah, you're Force Ghost, but we know cool. And I think that's another interesting thing as well. Is like, we have this established event. That is the fact. The fact that Anakin can Force Ghost now. But what do we take away from that? And I think that's something also interesting in terms about from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Is it cohesive? Should it be cohesive? Should everyone just have the same opinion that George Lucas had? It's like, yeah, he's redeemed. Yeah, he's a Force Ghost. It's all cool now. Happily ever after. Yay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of another thing of a lot of these post-Endor stories as well. You kind of have to break away from the George Lucas and like let's happily ever after. Because clearly, no, the Empire was still kicking. Palpatine was still kicking. And the hard it's actually now actually going to be a lot of hard work and a lot more problems. So that you break away from that as well. But Matthew, what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, just saying hi to Daisy. How's it going?
Hey.
There you go. Yeah, Force Ghosts are a great example too, right? I mean, whatever is happening in the world between Worlds and Ahsoka, it's because that's what she needs in that moment. And at the end of Return of the Jedi, because that's the thing, like Force Ghosts can come back however they want. There's no rules. We don't know. I mean, given that lore,
established rule apparently.
We shouldn't have any lore or rules about that. We shouldn't be given any of that. We can like have sort of we have that Clone Wars arc in season 6, which is a beautiful meditation on the meaning of Force Ghosts and how what it takes for a Jedi to fully give themselves to the Force and to the wider galaxy.
What about Anakin though? Like I was
and so so that's just it. Is Luke sees Hayden because he sees the Jedi who took a pause, right? I mean, that's another way of putting it. Anakin took a pause to be Vader for 20 years, and so it's just picking back up where he left off as this hero of the Republic and this hero of the Jedi, which kind of gets at what the Clone Wars was doing, the show was doing, but Luke needs to see the chosen one. Luke needs to see his father and the husband of Padme, right? That's why it's a Force Ghost. We don't know any kind of. It doesn't make sense to think in terms of, was this actually? Is it? What is it? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the.
I guess my question is not so much is it real or not. I guess my question is, at the end of Return of the Jedi, we take away from it that Anakin's redeemed. If you read Bloodline or Princess Scoundrel, we take away from it. Maybe he wasn't redeemed. And I guess if you're like someone who like needs canon to all mean the same thing, are you kind of like these authors are going against it?
So what I'm saying though is,
get all weird.
Is this story at hand exploring Anakin's redemption, or is it exploring Anakin's penance? And that's the thing, or not even that, but with Ahsoka, is it exploring? I mean, it's exploring Ahsoka's own processing through of that moment, her own recollection of history and what history means for abandoning him, the temple, right? Primarily, I think that's what's happening there. Whereas again with Luke, it's it's something else. He's processing, moving towards the future. I mean, they both move towards the future, but that's the thing. And it's in in Ahsoka that he just depicts himself as Vader. He depicts himself with the Sith eyes, right? He depicts himself as angry because Ahsoka needs to confront that.
Right.
And then at the end, I choose to live.
Mhm.
I mean, brilliant acting moment by Hayden.
Oh, yeah.
His eyes soften because the real person comes out.
Mhm.
I think there is even a bit of redemption for Anakin in that moment that we see. So, also, it's the world between worlds. Like, again, who knows? Who knows what the facts
Who
are,
knows?
right?
I pretty much think it
But
probably
that's the
is.
thing is, but that's also the inner core of the universe. That's what the world between worlds is, I'd say. The mystical core of the universe. And so it's there, it's all through history. You can actually move through it somehow because it's the unifying force, if you will. So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess I can move to this now note thing.
Mhm,
About how when it's interesting when
mhm,
different stories depict the same events that we've seen multiple times.
mhm.
I have this example here of the Battle of Hoth.
Yeah.
So, in the movie, the Battle of Hoth, the beginning of the battle, it's a big dramatic moment. It's like, oh my god, the Empire is striking back. Run for your life. We got, our heroes they got a bullet out of there. It's like Darth Vader chasing them down. They managed to escape just by the grip of their teeth. It's
Mhm,
like, it's like, oh my goodness, dramatic, drama, right? Like we
mhm,
gotta get out of here. Um, because that's a dramatic movie. That's what dramatic movies gotta do.
mhm.
Um, but in Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, a textbook.
Yeah.
Well, it's more than a textbook. It's like a classic history book.
Yeah.
Talking about the wider Galactic Empire and the implications of that. Where I think people might take on face value in the movie that, oh, that was a win for the Empire because the rebels had to run away, and
Yeah.
our heroes had to get chased down. Um, book acts the Rise and Fall of the Empire because it wants to treat the galaxy like a real place, and those implications go into like, hey, wait a minute. No, actually, the Battle of Hoth was not a victory for the Empire. The Empire
Mhm,
didn't achieve anything. All they did was just drive the rebels out of Echo Base, but the fleet's still around. High Command still got out of there. Most of the rebels escaped. So if the goal was to crush the rebellion once and at all, you lost,
yeah.
and you just start continuing to waste your resources again, more and more and more on fruitless efforts to defeat the rebellion. Another example is the Battle of Endor, because
Mm,
in the movie, the movie thinks, oh, it's these ragtag rebels,
yeah.
and it's their last greatest shot against the all powerful mighty Empire
Mhm,
with its limitless resources and evil emperor. Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire goes into the fact that actually, by the time of the Battle of Endor, the Empire has been pretty beaten. It has lost a lot of resources. It's kind of on its last legs.
mhm.
Even if Palpatine had, this is something friend to Dr. Ferrix, I bring that up a lot, would
Worth
say,
bringing up a lot.
oh, I mean, they are. They make good
Mm,
points. Would say that even if, like, say, Palpatine had, like, escaped, I'm not talking
yeah.
about Exegol escaped, I'm talking about, like, get in the escape pod and bolt out of there General Grievous style.
Yeah.
Yeah, loss of the Death Star, that would have been a killing blow to the Empire. I don't think he would have been able to hold it all together. Like, that's how badly bruised the
Yeah.
Empire was because of all their just, hey, being an Empire that does that to you and just kind of taking hit after hit
Mm,
after hit and like death by a thousand cuts. So again, we see the focus of the movie needing to be this dramatic moment with Luke,
mhm.
Han, Leia, and Vader and whatnot, versus this textbook about you know uh uh
Yeah.
you know
The long
well,
burn, the slow burn.
right, and
Yeah.
another example I
Well, I
heard
want to
about.
talk about that example
Oh yeah,
specifically
sure, yeah, go ahead.
because, um, yeah, that's a great point. Is this big dramatic moment of David is finally slaying Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I mean that's such a. I mean, I don't. Well, here's a great question: whether or not that literally happened, I don't know. Um, but that's such a great uh, moment in our psyche, and just the idea of the underdog. Talking
Mhm.
about the Super Bowl yesterday, right? The idea
Right.
of the underdog taking out the top dog, the favorites there. Yeah, this this rush of enthusiasm
Mhm.
and just glee at that happening. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Thrawn novels, the Thrawn trilogy, I should say, goes into that a little bit. Obviously, it's about the first Death Star,
Mhm.
but how putting all their eggs in one basket
Mhm.
is not the smart move. Thrawn is like, why do we? What's up with all this Dunium? Where's this Dunium going? What's going on here?
Mhm.
Oh, it's going into all this one massive circle with a circle inside. You know what a circle with a circle inside looks like?
A
Looks like
target.
you know. So hit this thing. um, and yeah, and how much prefer the tag doctrine, which of spreading out the resources and really stamping its foot on the galaxy, which the First Order, of course, does end up after the destruction of Starkiller Base does end up pursuing. So there's that angle of that, but then there's also there's Aftermath, which again, speaking of a book that has to do a lot of legwork with history, with the universe history, if you will. Um, that's also there's a Palpatine statue falls on Coruscant, and there's a riot because the police crack down, right? And we know that there's the Shadow Council. We know we learn, of course, about Rax and about Sloane and everything, and then we learn about Gideon and what he's up to, and he must have been up to a lot in this year as well. Of course, we just learned about a guy named Ulbrich Adelhard, what he got up to, and so
Mhm.
there's the Empire is uh, still a formidable threat for that, especially for that 1 year, right? And then, of course, with Gideon for further on, just in different pockets. And so that's an interesting thing. I mean, that's the question. I'm guessing that's a question that also came up in Legends, right? Does looking at the history, a more realistic history of how of regime change and
Mhm.
of there's such a drastic regime change between going from after a civil war,
Mhm.
going from an empire to a republic, at least on Coruscant and Chandrila and Hosnian Prime. Uh, did that take away a bit of the luster of the big moment in Return of the Jedi?
I
And that's
mean,
always the question. And so the question then is, can can the sequel trilogy justify its existence by having big climactic exciting moments and deep character story, but also this is where it gets to, does it have a meaningful realistic history? And I'm not fully sure it does, although it is interesting. And I think Charles Soule is going to do a lot of work to make it more interesting and make it work better.
I think Star Wars in general never had a
Mm.
true realistic history. I mean, your emperor is still a wizard.
True, there's that, but there's the Force. But yeah, it's a
I think here's a more interesting question,
yeah,
Matthew. To kind of,
yeah,
I think maybe let's reframe this a little bit.
sure.
I think things like Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire ask the
Mm,
question of, did the rebellion really defeat the Empire, or did the Empire just sort of collapse under its own weight
right.
and incompetence? Now I think there's a more nuanced answer than just either or.
Hmm.
But I think, if you watch just the movies, then it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, the rebels, we did it. We beat the Empire. We defeated Palpatine.
Mm,
Woohoo! You read the book, and it's like, well, it seems
mm,
like the Empire would have fallen no matter what because of just their sheer
true.
incompetence and just the size of their own
Yeah. I
hubris.
mean, here's a great real parallel. I think maybe what Chris Hemshaw's channeling a little bit is the Soviet Union, right?
I mean, probably
They were
more Nazi Germany too, but sure,
not
we
to
can go
Germany,
with it.
but they were on the brink of collapse. The United States did not
That's true.
really do much.
That's true.
Kennedy says bring down this, or Kennedy's I'm a Berliner. Reagan says bring down this wall.
Well,
It's like, okay, I guess we should.
they did really did. It's like, oh no, I mean, I guess if you want to hear it like that, like, yeah, it's like, no, the real people who brought down the Soviet Union could have brought down itself
Yeah,
through,
exactly. Is what I'm
through a whole
getting.
bunch of stuff that's very complicated.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Is that? But I think the story that a lot of even about, I don't know if the textbooks you were taught growing up about the Cold War,
Probably.
did they say Reagan destroyed the Soviet Union, this evil empire?
I don't think we ever had something that blunt, but I don't remember. But well,
Like,
here's a great
yeah,
example. British Empire. There was no
yeah,
grand revolution against against the British Empire.
yeah,
At least in the 20th century, just sort of like the British were like, we don't have enough resources to control all this. We're broke. World War One and Two
yeah,
broke. We're broke. We don't have the will.
sure.
All right, independence. Here you go. We're leaving. Goodbye.
Yeah, and even to say that they kind
Goodbye,
of
Canada.
they started to believe in democratic norms too. But yeah, I mean, well, that's just it.
You're on
Is
your own. Here's
well, yeah,
Charles.
so that's just it, right? I mean, so there's the American Revolution, independence. There are these rebellions in the 1830s, these skirmishes, and then there's this report. Okay, we don't want to do this again. We're not doing this again. So 30 years later, on a bar or the back of a napkin, okay, let's drop this Constitution. Yeah, that kind of thing. It just there wasn't. I mean, and to say, but that's another thing to say though is that also feeds into uh, this Canadian narrative of we're peaceable and just like democracy and like they all come together, and sometimes that works. Sometimes Indigenous folks don't buy that narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also that's kind of part of the British story as well. But yeah,
Or
yeah,
I'll go there. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there. Go
do
there.
it.
I'm gonna,
Yeah, we're doing.
you
I
know,
mean, we're talking about. So that's the thing. We're talking
in
about how
20
even in the real world, history is more complicated because we always have these narratives for it.
or here's a harsh truth. I think
Mhm.
in 2020,
Yeah,
did Biden beat Trump, or did Trump just screw up COVID so badly? It's like, yeah, we'll go with the other guy this time, and then
yeah,
oh, we don't like this guy anymore. We're going back to the other guy. And I have a feeling, give
yeah.
it a few more years, like people are gonna get sick of it. Like, okay, we're going back to the other guy. Like, do we beat these people or do they just screw themselves over? And then it's sort of like, well, we just better hope somebody's there to pick up
We
the
get
pieces.
tired and bored.
Yeah,
That is the pattern of presidential politics, right?
right.
I mean, how many times has how many two-term presidents have there been? There's been a few. How many times has a two-term president been succeeded by a president of the same party?
Let's see. We got Obama, Bush, Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, Bush Senior may have been the only one in recent memory.
Yeah, Bush Senior was like the last one-term president. Then we had like,
But I mean, let's say like how many two-term presidents were succeeded by a president from
oh,
the
by
same
the same
party?
party. Oh no, it's always been back and
Like
forth.
uh, Bush Senior, probably the only one, right?
Yeah, and
After
also
Reagan.
you gotta kind of keep in mind Obama and Clinton.
Yeah, very
They're
different.
kind of one of a kind. You know, you don't have to like them, but
Sure.
and Bush kind of is his own unique little thing. But Obama and Clinton, like they were kind of like they were the
Yeah.
charismatic. Like people didn't care about the party. I think they just liked them as people. Like Obama
Right.
was the guy, and for a long time, and Clinton back in the '90s was
Mm,
the guy. And then when the
yeah.
guy can't run anymore, it's like, okay, I don't care about
No,
the party.
it's the character. It's a character story.
Right.
That's wild, right? I mean, that's
Even with
you
Trump, it's like people like
yeah.
Trump. I don't know if they like the rest of the party, quite frankly.
Yes. So yeah, yeah, that's the point being. I mean, I've talked about with the Acolyte. Actually, Acolyte just brings this up so beautifully. That episode 3, when I've talked about this multiple times. Even what we think are facts are always mediated through narratives,
Mhm,
right? And we can go through what we see, the news we get on Instagram about some certain things going on in the Middle East or wherever. I mean, that's the thing is even the things I believe are facts about what's going on in that country there.
mhm,
You know, there are other people who are looking at a whole different set of facts, whole
mhm.
different narrative, you know, or whole different whatever. Like there are people who believe ICE is entirely about stopping human trafficking. They do that. Probably
Sure.
because at least one of the things maybe they do sometimes, you know, is stop human trafficking. Uh, they do a whole bunch of they create human trafficking, but that's a whole other story. Um, so yeah, back to Star Wars.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's. I think. Well, I mean, here's the thing: what narratives are each individual story really telling
Yeah.
here? Is Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire? I feel you can argue tells the narrative of yeah, there was a rebellion and they were important, but the empire fell because empires always fall.
Mm-hmm.
That's just human history, folks. Obviously, we got to fit it within a fantastical world made up of movies.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to treat this like a real history, then actually, Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire actually does a really good job integrating sequentiality stuff too. So you should read that.
Mm-hmm.
But the empire kind of just falls because of its own incompetence, quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, of course it was gonna fall. What do you think was gonna happen? Um, I don't think it downplays the rebellion, at all. But in
Sure.
terms of like Star Wars as the dramatic fiction, that the movies are,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the narrative that Rise and Fall of the Empire is saying.
Yeah.
Bloodline is not necessarily following the narrative of Anakin's redemption was squeaky clean and everybody was okay with it at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's interesting. Different authors kind of
Sure.
bringing in their own narratives as well as sticking with the narrative that we have already. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and hold on, I had a point, and I kind of oh shoot, I lost my point. I
Mm-hmm.
lost my point there. Just are dealing with certain implications, like um, I was thinking about um, I'm sure there are
Mm-hmm.
stories, I just don't remember any, where like in Revenge of the Sith, we have the Battle of Coruscant. We ever
Mm-hmm.
deal with the implications of the Battle of Coruscant? Like Coruscant just got attacked and had like a huge invasion. I'm sure that's gonna mess up some civilians who live there.
Yeah.
It's not just because after Revenge, after the battle, it's like, Coruscant looks fine. We just crashed the ship, but the rest of the city
Don't
looks
want to
fine.
spoil. Mask of Fear does touch on that a little bit.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
See, like by Mask of Fear, because it's got a different focus. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, our capital was attacked and invaded.
Yeah.
That's gonna mess up some
Yeah.
people and have lots of implications that the movie didn't have time to deal with.
Yeah. Sure.
So again, that focus from a certain point of view, as I'd like to say.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Um, I guess Oh yeah, I guess another thing is also tone. That's
Mm-hmm.
also from a certain point of view, and
Yeah.
I think things like Young Jedi Adventures and Clone Wars
Yeah.
also kind of go into from a certain point of view angle, where it's like Young Jedi Adventures is a kid show. Obviously, it's set in the High Republic, and I think that's probably a big reason why it gets to be that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could do Young Jai adventures like storytelling in the dark times. I mean, you could, but
You
I
never
think never
know.
how.
Some
You
weird
never
corner of the. Yeah.
you could. I never know how, but you could. Um, but if
Yeah.
we were to get, but you could tell an Andor tone style story in set in the High Republic.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, Acolyte's kind of the closest thing we got to that.
Now I need that. Shoot.
I would love that. I would love
Yeah.
that too. I would love to see kind of that kind of tone and kind of being able to kind
Mm-hmm.
of push away. Like you'd lose
Yeah.
some of the Camelot of High Republic,
Yeah.
but that's actually another reason why I'm excited for the aftermath of High Republic. I feel like
Mhm.
then you can kind of maybe tell stories that are kind of outside of High Republic's kind of
Yeah.
tonal range of Camelot
Mm-hmm.
meets Arthurian Knights, and maybe do more of an Alexander Freed type
Yeah.
tone in that story. I'd love to see
Well,
maybe like
the closest thing we get to, I think, are everything with so they're short stories, but I think it's Alyssa Wong's short stories on Corellia, especially with Drigget Pars,
mm-hmm,
who is this Nile is. I mean, she's from Valo. Uh, she's part of the Nile, but her loyalty or allegiance is to Valo,
right.
and so she ends up getting information and trying to helping the Jedi. She's basically doing this undercover spy.
Mm-hmm,
And it kind of gets that. I mean, she's a younger character. She's kind of 16, 17, so it
mm-hmm.
can't get as dark, but it really gets into her loyalties and allegiances.
I mean,
Um,
that would.
yeah.
I mean, that would be interesting. Like, I would love. I don't know if you could do this. Well, maybe you can. I
Mhm.
would love to see Alexander, because this is something Alexander Freed does because he did Rogue One
Yeah.
novelization. Like, I don't know,
Well, he's doing
like
Mask of Fear,
a
right?
a a, a High Republic era story about
Mhm.
like a kind of shady group of commandos that Lena
Yeah.
So hires, and it's like they're like cutthroats, and but they're going into Nile territory because like only you guys can do this because this
Or
is
like
something
Section 31. Just kidding.
I mean, hey, it's kind of
No,
like I mean, kind of go to Star Trek for a hot second. I
yeah.
feel like if Section 31 was done properly, from what I've heard, I've actually haven't seen it, so I don't want to judge.
It's okay.
It's that should be a story with a tone that's
Mhm.
even more darker than Deep Space Nine, where
Yeah.
you got the Federation supposed to be like squeaky clean for the most part, but
Mhm.
Section 31, it's like here we're used to the Star Trek universe being like
Yeah.
Federation, the future, diversity, open mindedness. Section 31 is like we gotta kill this guy, kill him, gotta go. Oh
Yeah.
wait, we gotta destroy a religion because they're gonna make the Federation our
Yeah.
threaten our utopia. Um,
Just try. Yeah.
hey, the Deep Space Nine crew had some
Oh,
weird
it did.
ideas for
It was
Bejor
great. It was
in
amazing.
Section 31. So,
Yeah.
kind of like that, where it's like a story because of the different focus, you're gonna have a different tone
Hmm.
that's so different from what you're used to. So, kind
Yeah.
of imagine that, like you're used to that high republicness. That it can
Mm.
get dark. Don't get me wrong, it can get dark. But imagine almost something where it's like
Mhm.
almost Andor, very brutish, very like
Yeah.
cutthroat black ops, but during this particular time period.
I mean, or
And but they coexist in the same canon.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, Vernestra,
Mhm.
during the Acolyte or something, sending. I mean, that might have been what season two would have done in at least in
Yeah.
some section of it. Sending in this crack team to investigate this Sith potential threat.
Mhm.
Not that they don't know it's a Sith, but something like that. Although, yeah, I'd love to see Drigget Parse spy a Valo, right?
Mhm.
See if she survives and she grows up. I don't know. That yeah, right. That it is a nice opportunity here for at once the High Republic is done,
Mhm.
and we have to change our tagline to say, okay, let's continue telling these stories. And we're getting a Vernestra story set around the Acolyte as well by
Mhm.
Justina Ireland. So that's gonna be fun. But yeah, I mean, even during the High Republic, or yeah, in and around there, like even just a few years after, the Republic is still pretty squeaky clean and gleaming, and that's kind of where this question of facts and canon continuity bring back to the main discussion here,
Right.
where it gets maybe a little more elastic, right? Because we ask the question, would the Republic at this time sanction something like this, right? With the whole thing with Section 31, would the Federation really have something like this, and why? And one of the things with Section 31 was trying to do was to question that, but just raise that question in the first place. Didn't do that enough or at all. But
Just watch Deep Space Nine. They do that
yeah,
perfectly.
they all absolutely does. But uh, where we're introduced to them. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, it raises again. The point is to well, here's an interesting thing is to say
Mhm.
that very question of why would a Republic have a crack team like this
Mhm.
that cuts these corners and gets does the sturdy work. That does say that historical facts, if you will, are important because that's the political setting. That's the milieu that we're in. We're in Camelot. It's just the dusty, dirty corner of Camelot, right?
Mhm.
That does need to be cleaned up, or maybe doesn't. That exists. I mean, that's the thing with Section 31. The idea that exists so the rest of it can be squeaky clean and cleans up all the mess.
I mean, I would love that story about
Yeah,
like I want to see I want to see the Black Ops of the High
yeah.
Republic during Lena Sill's time, if there is one. Wouldn't that be
I mean, the
something?
Jedi do a lot of work, but
That's true. It's like you never know. It's even deeper. Well, here's another great
yeah,
example of this. The Clone Wars.
yeah,
The Clone Wars. I think the Clone Wars 2008 show. Because
hmm
this is interesting. Because like we've gotten so many depictions of the Clone Wars. And I'm not talking about just the '90s stuff. I'm talking about like
hmm
just books, comics from the Legends time and from
hmm
like early 2000s in the show. Um,
yeah,
we've had so many depictions of the Clone Wars, and it's interesting, kind of the Lucas Filoni depiction of the Clone Wars, the 2008 show, versus
Mhm.
how you would read about the Clone Wars and the Republic during the Karen Travis's Republic Commando stuff, because that is sort of
Sure.
I would argue that the Clone Wars, the show, is for the
Mhm.
most part kind of like the High Republic, Jedi focused. I mean, you got your Padme arcs and your Maul arcs and whatnot, of course. But
Mhm.
I would say for the most part, we see a lot of Jedi, we see a lot of
Well,
Ahsoka,
Ahsoka's the main character,
obviously.
and
Ahsoka's
Rex is
main,
the main character.
we see a lot of the clones themselves.
Mhm.
But so we kind of see a bit more. I mean, it gets a little moved away in later seasons, but a bit more of a here are the Republic, and we got to fight them evil separatists. It's like even the
Mhm.
the newsreels of like the separatists have their evil machine of doom, led by the evil General Grievous.
Yeah.
Who's cackling maniacally. Blah,
They're
and Count
literally a machine of doom.
and Count Dooku's like, yes, master, we will destroy the Republic with our evil machine of doom. Kind of a little bit black and white. We'll get a little more gray later in those final
Yeah.
seasons. But you read like a Karen Travis book,
Mhm.
and that's pretty much
Interesting.
here's Section 31, the Republic Commandos. Here's Section 31 of the Republic. They're cutthroat. They're supporting coups on
Yeah.
planets and installing dictators who have oil.
Interesting.
This was made in the mid 2000s during the Bush administration. People,
Right.
it's very like, oh no, the Republic really is just doing all this CIA dirty stuff already. It's very overt.
Mhm.
Where I think Clone Wars kind of I think early on and even in its middle seasons, like it held back a little bit more. Held back a little bit more on that. Could kind of show more.
Mhm.
I would argue, kind of be more from a certain point of view of what Kenobi thought. Your
Mhm.
father was a good pilot, a good friend, right? I
Yeah.
think you almost have to watch the Clone Wars, the 2008 show, as almost from Kenobi's perspective of he have his memories of the Clone Wars and like yeah, me and Anakin were young and we kicked a lot of butt and we were good pals.
Yeah.
While something like a Karen Travers book is basically here's
Yeah.
Section 31,
Well,
the book.
so I mean, with Clone Wars, it's especially from Ahsoka's point of view,
What?
and Ahsoka is a teenager, right? She has a level of sophistication, but this is kind of what you're getting at in different ways of training people to be better better Star Wars, engage with Star Wars better. But also, I mean, that's the thing with fiction. On the other hand, it's this complete fantasy of good guys and bad guys.
Mhm.
Um, and that's the thing, Rebels, Empire, right? It's in the DNA of the show, right? It's in the DNA of the franchise. That there are good guys and bad guys, but what we're getting with Andor, for example, we're getting with I'm trying to remember some other stories. I mean, probably with some of the High Republic,
Mask of Fear, I think,
yeah,
is more in
Mask
the
of Fear might dive in everything the Saga era, right?
Mhm.
Uh, questioning that a little bit. Clone Wars, by and large, from Ahsoka's point of view, shows the Republic and the Jedi as these gleaming heroes. Rex is literally programmed to believe that, right?
Right.
It's only until the very end
Mhm.
when he sees, oh, wait a minute, we're you know we've been this war has ripped the galaxy apart.
Mhm.
We wouldn't exist without it, but yet it's taken this massive toll. That
Mhm.
complexity, yeah, by and large, these gleaming heroes preserving peace and justice
Mhm.
against this vile separatist threat. The
Right.
only kind of time we poke through and see what
Mhm.
the actual grievances of the separatists are, we get Mina Bonteri, for
Right.
example, where we could have gotten, the Count Dooku's a visionary. That line is so funny and so surprising because we never really get that point of view, and yet there
We do a little in
was.
Bad Batch with that one
We doing
separatist.
Bad Batch, yeah, we're doing Bad Batch with the guy
Mhm.
on area, not area, on
No, it's a different
on
planet
Sereno,
that
on
no,
Sereno.
it's a different episode with Crosshair invading a Seppi holdout world.
Okay, I thought there's also one on Sereno.
Yeah, but he hates that guy. Doesn't like Dooku.
It doesn't like to. Okay, don't remember that. That yeah, we got it somewhere else. Oh wow, I'm blanking on that. I had it just a second ago.
I know
Just
Anton
different.
Krieger, the separatist in Andor, but we don't see him in the
Yeah,
shows.
but like folks who well, in I mean, even to some extent with Dooku in Tales of the Jedi,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
A little bit about how the Republic and the Jedi are pretty imperial at that point. To bring that full circle, but yeah, I mean, we don't get much in terms of what the what separatist street was saying, if you will. There had to be some huge groundswell of support for this movement.
Hmm.
That, I mean, that's kind of my sense of the history. Then is of the history of the
Hmm.
whatever the universe history. There were grievances. I mean, there were grievances, probably since the Nile, and that's one of the
If not
things,
longer.
if not longer. Um, but more legitimate grievances of center versus periphery, and
Hmm.
our needs and our rights being considered adequately enough by Coruscant.
Hmm.
Um, that that movement was hijacked by the Trade Federation and the Techno Union.
The
Uh,
Sith.
but well, ultimately, and that's the thing. Ultimately, by the Sith, and that's why whenever we end up seeing Dooku, we know in our minds this is a fascinating moment. And we see the Parliament, and Bonteri's there,
Right.
and she's like, and everyone's like, "Yeah, Dooku, our guy. He's our guy.
Hmm.
We know he's not your guy. We know that." Um,
Right.
but in the story, that Monteri here is
Hmm.
trying to work for peace, and her and Padme are trying to uh, give peace a chance for real, using the institutions, using the instruments of government. Um, Ultimately, the story of Star Wars, and the story of the prequel trilogy, especially, is that the instruments of government are predisposed against
Hmm.
actual peace and justice, and generally for profit and conflict. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think this brings up a great point. Maybe to kind of
Mm-hmm.
our final moments of,
Mm-hmm.
while we do have all these certain points of views, and definitely certain things
Mm-hmm.
do shift and fade. I do think, though, there are things that are solid. I do think there are
Yeah.
things that are factual. Actually, I mean, let's be fair. I mean, we might get one author who just goes completely out the rails, but for the most part, I think Star Wars has stuck pretty hard with this,
Consistent.
been consistent on this. Where it's like, no matter how messy or complicated we can depict the rebellion, I'm thinking of Saw, we never equate that to being Saw questionable, therefore Empire might be good.
Right.
We never say that. Um, Especially because I think a big thing to always remember is, a friend of mine once so eloquently put it: "Force used by the oppressed does not equal force used by the oppressor."
Mm.
Um, so Saw do bad, blow up kids in bus equal Empire now good. That's not what Star Wars ever says.
Right.
Right. We
Right.
see Nina Von Terry and you know I keep bringing up Daughter of the Pharaoh this week, but I've seen a lot of their stuff, so I like reading it. I know,
Mm-hmm.
like they brought up, like, yeah, maybe yes, I think a lot of these worlds probably did have legit reasons to secede and
Mm-hmm.
separate and be separatist, but I don't think Star Wars ever then goes into, well, Count Dooku actually then was a good guy the whole time. No, he was totally an evil person, and by the end, and
Mm-hmm.
completely kind of very depending on Actually, another thing reading about the Revenge of the Sith
Mm-hmm.
novelization, he's a total alien hater, and he's just kind of a racist who thinks like I'm
Right.
better than everybody. So he's not coming in good faith with this movement, like you said. It's been hijacked
Mm-hmm.
by Sith lords and psychotic droid generals and business leaders,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or even if Jedi get into bed with Republic, that doesn't mean the dark side is now the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that
Yeah.
within all these points of views and tones, and you know, whether or not the move, I don't think that regardless, there are still things that are consistent. The rebellion is still
Mm-hmm.
in the morally right. The empire is still evil.
Yeah.
Even if or like here's a great example. Like seeing Ray Sloan, characters like Ray Sloan
Yeah.
or Iden Versio, characters who are not just mustache twirly evil villains.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean all of a sudden the Empire is good. It's actually kind of more scary because, like, why
Yeah.
does someone who seems like a rational person, like I could have a cup of tea with, still work for this evil regime? Something people always talk about Ray Sloan being the quote unquote the honorable Imperial. If she was so honorable, why didn't she defect from the rebellion after 2 Death Stars?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's, if you ever read Alexander Freed's Alphabet Squadron,
Hmm.
one of the big things that book goes into is depending on when you leave the Empire, you're going to be treated differently. So,
Interesting.
like, if you are like leave before think about it though.
Yeah.
If you left before the first Death Star, you're treated quite well because it's like,
Hmm.
okay, we can kind of see why you thought the Empire was okay. A lot of these people were like old Republic officers who still thought, hey, I'm fighting the Separatists, I'm fighting the good fight here.
Yeah.
But then they realized, like, oh no, wait, this isn't the Republic anymore. And then, if you defect after the first Death Star or the destruction of Alderaan, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe it took a while. You needed kind of that wake up call of like, they're
Yeah.
destroying planets. But if you haven't defected by the second Death Star, they're going to destroy planets. You were there.
Don't know what to
What
say
are
to you.
what are you doing? What are you doing? And then
Yeah.
Ray Sloan goes off to found the First Order,
Yeah.
and just do
True.
it all over again. So
Hmm.
I think those sorts of core moral distinctions
Yeah.
are still there, regardless.
Yeah. I mean, well, even Santa Ray. It's
Oh yeah,
interesting in well, I think she's gonna
she
get a
goes
bit
to
of a pass.
Jakku. She goes to Jakku.
Yeah, I mean, she might get a bit of a pass. Just like what's his name? Like he's probably gonna vouch for her because they're
Probably.
they're in
Love.
Lurf. Um, yeah. Wow. How am I blanking? Anyway, well, it's interesting because earlier in that novel, one of their buddies in the kind of the unit there, their officer, whatever, is from Alderaan,
Mhm,
and he yeah, he sees his own people, his own team
mhm.
destroy. These are all Imperials, right?
Right.
Destroy his own planet,
Mhm.
and I think it radicalizes him even further, which is also scary. But
Oh, it
yeah,
can. Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's a great reminder that Santa sticks around. Maybe I mean that's the thing though. That's the complexity of it. The the world she grows up in
Mhm,
is one in which the Empire saved her family, saved her community, right?
mhm,
That has power. That has power. There was that uh, Dark Visions, Darth Vader Dark Visions.
mhm.
One of them where Vader comes in the knight in shining armor, riding on a horse,
Right.
right? Um, so yeah, it's I understand why, but I also think my mind went to you know if there is a dust settling. Um, well, no, I'll use a better real world example. When we talk about complicity with the Nazis, you know, we gotta give people different levels of flack, or cut people some slack, depending on how much power and influence they had in German society at the time. You know, Pope Benedict was HJ, right? Like he didn't have anything, didn't have any power, right? He was just a kid. Got to cut him some slack. Whereas someone who
Yeah.
looks back on that story and kind of denying the Holocaust, that's a problem. No, Benedict didn't, but um, some other bishops did, and that got in trouble. Um, that kind of level of when there is a reckoning, where is the hope for reconciliation? Maybe that's where I'm going here, and this is where I'm going into our real world situation now. If there is a reckoning, some sort of reckoning when the dust settles with Trump, that's what did you defect before January 6th? Did you defect after January 6th? Did you stick around? That's gonna be an interesting question. But also, that's the thing is that's gets back to um, how our real world stories are still character stories, and what is the meaning of our stories, even though, what are the meaning of those facts,
Mhm.
historical facts, not just the bare historical record, but how can we assess that meaning? Why did you stay in to Trump's second term? Why'd you keep following him? What were you buying what he was selling about peace and security, right?
Uh,
Those, and why? How were you raised? Where'd you grow up in? That, I mean, that's Santa Ree's story. It is a very realistic, real world story. And Thane Carell, so it has to literally go onto her Star Destroyer and grab her because it's going down. So
I
yeah,
I mean, I will say again, man, you just gotta read Fall of the Galactic Empire. You just need to sit down and read the whole
I
thing.
do, I do.
Because like that book goes into a great moment
Mhm,
about you know, the building of the republic, and
mhm,
what do we do with all these imperial bureaucrats
mhm.
and people who functionaries, right?
Yeah,
And the book goes, and you're like, not all of them were psychotic evil. Some of them were just doing their thing,
yeah.
keeping the bureaucracy running. And it's like,
Mhm,
what do we do? Do we get rid of them all? Do we keep putting back in?
mhm.
Um, and like that's the scientist dude from Mando whole spiel.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that guy.
Mhm,
I mean, that's Operation Paperclip for you, where it's like,
yeah.
where we said, hey, these Nazi scientists, they weren't that bad. They didn't have power. I mean,
Pershing,
though,
Dr.
like
Pershing.
Dr. Pershing, but that's what Operation Paperclip was like. Yeah, they didn't have power. These guys, they atoned.
Mhm,
Although they probably, the thing is, they secretly didn't. And it's like, here, we just need you. We need to fight the commie. So
mhm,
go make our rockets. Well, Warner Braun. We'll completely say that you weren't totally a Nazi supporter through and through, and we'll
mhm,
just say, oh, Hitler made you do it, and just sign here. Yeah, it's good. It's also yeah,
mhm.
you got to think of how to reconcile, but also it's like sometimes you got to be careful because like you
Yeah,
might accidentally be letting the people back into power again, and then we're just
yeah,
back to where we start. Um, I mean, that's what we're
true.
seeing in Ahsoka and Mandoverse too, where it's like,
Mhm.
hey, these people don't care about politics; they're just here to work, and then they're shooting "Long live the Empire" and Ahsoka in the
Yeah,
Kuat drive yards.
right.
Um, so yeah, but I think we got a little off topic there. That's a different.
Well, this has been a bit of a rambly episode. I mean, one thing. I mean, you gotta. Well, again, this is an in-universe recollection and facts from a
Hmm.
point of view,
Hmm.
right? Is, in those contexts, you got to be pragmatic and say, well, we need starship builders, we need bureaucrats, we need people who know what they're doing. Can we be pragmatic and give them a bit of a pass if they maybe kept their head down, and did their job
Right.
regardless? Um, yeah, it's a wild question. How do you? It's almost a risk regimes are going to have to take. I think there's going to be, again, and there's a reckoning here. Folks who got into the bureaucracy because of Project 25, uh, they're there now. There's only so much you can do. If they're willing to cooperate, you know, uh, do we fire them, or do we, do we try to hire new people, or do we let make good use of their institutional memory and take the risk that they're not going to undermine the government, that they actually believe government is good for something? Yeah, it's
Well,
a
actually, that
yeah,
actually, I'll steer back to our original conversation.
yeah,
Um, this might be something. Ooh, sorry, my dad got back. Scared me for a
it's yeah,
second. This will be a good topic for later.
yeah,
We should be on for this one. It's be a good one. But
hmm,
to kind of go back to the point of view thing,
hmm,
I think we'll end it with this. Skeleton Crew, I think, is a great example. Again, I brought this up during our Skeleton Crew discussion.
hmm,
Mandoverse and Ahsoka, well, Mandalorian and Ahsoka, um, you
hmm,
know, because they're a little bit skewed older.
hmm,
They're about older characters. You know,
yeah,
yeah, Ahsoka and Mando or Grogu are Mando are full on adults.
Mhm.
Ahsoka's not even a teenager anymore. She's an adult. She's older than Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Um, their view of the Republic is a bit more cynical. It's a bit more skeptical. It's a bit more, is this government doing diddly?
Right.
Wim is a kid. He doesn't
Yeah.
know who the good guys are for a good chunk of the show.
Mhm.
And then in the final episode, the real good guys, here come the X-wings, and they're kicking butt, taking names.
Yeah.
We're not, we're not here to talk about like, ooh, why is it that this planet gets the special treatment while Navarro didn't? It's like, nah,
Mhm.
that's not the point. It's here are the good guys, and they're kicking butt, just like we saw in the New Hope back in '77. It's kind of it's a kid focus,
Yeah.
and because of that, the good guys, the Republic, there are heroes. We're not going to deal with the whether or not Senator Ziono had to have a whole committee meeting before that happened. We're just
You know,
they're here to take on the pirates, and they do,
and who's
right?
to
And I
say
think
Ziona's wrong to have a committee meeting, right?
that's true.
It's
But
just because
but
the story in Ahsoka. Yeah. The point being with Wim. Yeah, Wim's a great example of point of view,
hmm
right? That show, like that's what we talked all about last week,
hmm
is how disciplined that show is on having the kids be the point of view characters,
hmm
and in their kind of confusing. I mean, jumping out into a new planet, it's confusing, and you got to latch on to what you know, and sometimes what you know is can be quite simplistic. You see someone using the force. Oh yeah, he's a Jedi. He's a hero. He's going to help us. Little does you know, and that's his character arc. But then, yeah, figures it out. I mean, he explicitly says kind of what we're getting at in this whole episode is, oh, who are the real good guys, right? The episode on with the telescope owl cat lady.
hmm
You know, um, are we supposed to trust her? Are we not supposed to trust her? Jod says we aren't supposed to trust her, and we trust Jod, but except who ends up acting trustworthy. So, yeah, great point.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um. So yeah, just so final thoughts. Star Wars does have some pretty hardcore, consistent things throughout
Yeah,
all its stories. Empire bad, light side the right side.
yeah,
Just because character makes questionable choices doesn't mean they're now the bad guy, right?
right.
A Thrawn novel doesn't mean the Empire is good people.
Mhm.
Um, let's keep that focus.
Yeah, but that would be too
Um,
far, right?
right, but but again, I do think, every story is set differently. Every story has a different focus. The
Mhm.
saga films are a little bit more overly dramatic. There are more clear cut. Here are the good guys.
Mhm.
Here are the bad guys. Your emperors are your cackling madmen. Your heroes are your swashbuckling pirates with hearts of gold.
Yeah.
Whereas something like Andor, it's like Deidre and Cyril Karn are the antagonist. They're
Mhm.
not good. They work for these evil regimes and support them. But for a little bit, we're kind of on Deidre's side for a little bit because,
Yeah.
like, oh, here's this lady dealing with some office politics, and then when we see what she gets her power, it's like, oh shoot, we forgot you're a fascist and you're gonna torture poor Nemec, not Nemec, he's dead.
Mhm.
Bix,
Right.
and I think in a unified canon, I think it's always kind of good to have a little bit of separation. Remember, they're stories at the end of the day, and stories aren't history books. Only
Right.
history books like Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire are history books.
Right.
And even that's kind of a story and tone of itself.
And it's about a fictional universe too. So
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think that's just something good to keep in mind when you're devouring your Star Wars stuff. But yeah, that's my final thought.
Yeah.
Any last final thoughts, Matthew?
Uh, it's interesting what we find is interesting
hmm
when and that's always kind of conditioned to in terms of when we explore something that maybe have more moral wrinkles
hmm
than what we've done before. That and then the fact that we've gone back to things that may have simpler, morally simpler, because
Young
I
Jedi
mean that's kind of my
Adventures.
whole theory of with Star Trek and Trump and presidential administrations is that during Bush we had the religious right being trying to be all squeaky clean, and so we say no, let's tell this dirty gritty enterprise show Maybe Clone Wars is in on that too. The prequel trilogy is definitely part of that. Then uh, you know, Obama and everything is okay, more or less, at least from Hollywood's perspective. And then
Early MCU
yeah,
is very Obama influenced. I'll just say
yeah.
that.
And then with Trump, it's not. We don't want to be squeaky. We don't want to question squeaky clean. We need to bring it back and be more aspirational and tell more aspirational stories. Maybe which is why something like Skeleton Crew hit the zeitgeist. And so questions that stories that maybe High Republic, why it hit the zeitgeist, all enough because it does return to this more squeaky clean republic, that these
Mhm.
institutions could be that if we have the right people in there and people who are focused on the common good, and that democratic institutions are more robust. Um, all I'm saying is these things, whether or not like we see a story depicting our good guys doing morally questionable things,
Mhm.
that has everything to do with the real world and what
Oh yeah.
an author is trying to say in the real world. And we shouldn't be too concerned. We can say, okay, that's an interesting angle, an interesting wrinkle on this more complex institution that is the Galactic Republic. It is a very complex institution, right? The Galactic Senate, even the Jedi Order are very complex institutions because they're so darn big at this time. Interestingly, of course, after Order 66, Jedi Order not that complex because not that big, right? Of
That's
course,
true.
individual people are complex, but um, you know, so there are ways of reconciling these kind of inconsistencies, but also the more interesting question is, what is the creative trying to say about our real world, and the meaning of facts, meaning of the way we aggregate facts into narratives, and we have to leave out some facts to focus on others, maybe seem more important. So uh a good reminder that we do that in the real world as well.
I will once again say, Read Rise Fall of the Galactic Empire. It is one of those books that tries to get at
Mm,
least some of those inconsistencies consistent and
sure.
synthesize things and make a narrative around it.
Yeah,
So
and I think
read that
Legacy
book.
Vader is going to do a bit of that. um Mask of Fear definitely doing its work, showing just that there's different. I mean, that's something Mask of Fear. They're within the coalition of the 2000, whatever it is. There are different reasons why folks wanted to question Palpatine, but check on Palpatine, and they may not all agree. So that's the last thing I'll say about that book because I don't want to spoil anything because that hasn't come out yet. But
Oh yeah, I keep
yeah,
forgetting it hasn't come out yet because everyone's talking about it at this
yeah.
point. Like,
So
ugh,
it comes out in 2 weeks. So I gotta finish
not
it. For this.
yes. All right, I
Yeah.
I think we did it. We got a little
Mhm.
rambly, but I think we hit our topic.
Yeah.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah. It was kind of a rambly topic. It was kind of one of those things that's very nebulous. And so, by definition, the point is that these facts are kind of nebulous, even though they have consistency to them. But yeah, here we are. Your
So
point
what
to
we
wrap things
told
up. So good.
you was true from a certain point of view.
There we go. And that's a good place to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us in the comments. Watching live on all different places. If you're a real person, especially so. If you're a bot on Twitch, go away. But thanks everyone for joining us. If you are a real person, please do comment below what you thought of our episode, what you thought of the Matthew Stover Revenge of the Sith uh, speech and all that novel, especially tying into our main topic from a certain point of view, different many different perspectives. We even have these novels, these short story collections that I've handily put there because that's the whole premise. Different things happen from a certain point of view. Thanks, Tyler. Well, that's I know your day job is to do everything in capital letters, but good job. There you go.
Uh,
Have a good night. Yeah, so please do let us know what you think. And of course, do give this video a like and a share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Joel, thanks again for going through this discussion. Very complex, a lot of moving parts. But yeah, thanks as always. And also, where can they find you on the internet?
you can find me at GID20234 on Blue Sky. Again, GID20234 on Blue Sky. But primarily, you can find me on Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we have game nights, movie nights, lots of fun discussion, and more.
Nice. You can find my personal Twitter, my personal Instagram and threads, MNEUG1138, personal Twitter, NUG45, also foodie Twitter. I got some nice beer up there and get some other things posting that right after this. Yeah, on beaches, foodie beaches.foodie, FODIE. That's also on Instagram. Yeah, and of course, I'm also on Blue Sky at MNEUG1138 and on the Twitter, NEG45, as I mentioned. Also, of course, at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCNONPOD on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Of course, Iron Cannon on Blue Sky. And then again, this Wednesday, we're talking about High Republic. Speaking of Tyler, sure, I'm guessing worked on one or both of those books. High Republic Adventures number 15 and Bad Batch Ghost Agents. That's what's called, Ghost Agents number 1. Please do join us this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on Underworld, Facebook, Underworld, YouTube, Underworld, Twitch, and Ion Cannon Twitch. All right, next week we are possibly taking a break. There we go. Thanks. Good to know. Comicraft's Tyler Smith there. I believe Comicraft, right? So yeah, next week we are TBD. I'm taking a break the next 2 weeks because, as mentioned, I'm next Monday is a holiday here in Ontario. It's called Family Day. And then the week after that, I am flying to those United States of America where the Republic, one nation under God, indivisible, with peace and justice for all. Did I get it right? Did I get that right? Peace and liberty?
More or
Is it peace and
less.
liberty? I got it.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've never had to recite it in my life, and I never will. But I never
I'm
know.
surprised I still remember it.
Yeah. I mean, you never know. I might become an American citizen one day. Who knows? But anyway, yes, I'm flying, going there for a conference, so I'll be away. But then, yeah, I am visiting America again in July for San Diego. Booked my hotels for LA and hostels and whatnot. So yeah, next in 2 weeks I'll be in Kansas City for a conference, and then in July I'll be in Los Angeles, and then little fan gathering in San Diego happening in July. Not that important. My first time there, so I'm going to be excited. I'm excited for that. But yeah, that's in the future. That's in the future. So keep your eyes peeled, especially on Blue Sky in the Discord for the topic next week and the next 2 weeks, and see. Yeah, Joel, you'll be sure to update the good people of the Iron Cannon podcast fandom.
I'll hopefully align a guest very soon.
Got some guests. There we go. We align a guest appears suddenly. Anyway, but yeah. Anyways, that does it for our episode tonight. Again, everything we told you is true from a certain point of view. Joel, let's blow this thing and head out.